Welcome to this episode of Your Lifestyle is Your Medicine. Today we're going to be talking to Barb Sheldon. Now, Barb has more than 20 years of food experience, and she's not just a practical nutritionist. She has also conducted academic research into areas of food dignity, education, and leadership. And in particular, her graduate work focused on leadership within food literacy education designed for the LGBTQ2S and youth community. She's got a private practice and has supported clients all over the world. In addition to that, she's also coached nutrition or taught nutrition rather up to college level. She specializes in helping people in leadership positions maximize their nutrition to avoid burnout so they can do what they do best. This episode is brought to you by Regency for Expats, one of the most innovative health insurance providers out there. They aim to help people like me who are globally mobile and looking to cover their health as they live and work around the world. Now, I particularly recommend Regency because not only do they fully support you in an emergency, they are looking to change the insurance industry by being proactive with their care. That means they offer counseling services, nutritional coaching, and fitness consultations as part of their regular insurance packages. And what I find amazing about that is they're not limited like some insurance companies. Now, does your insurance company offer you that? If not, go to regencyforexpats.com to find out more. With that said, let's get to the show. Barb, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, I'm excited to have our discussion today. But before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of nutrition and how nutrition relates to lifestyle medicine, I want to put things into context for our listeners. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, certainly. So I started off in the restaurant industry 25 years ago after it sort of wooed me away from university when I was like 19 years old, because I'd always loved food and loved serving people. And throughout my journey in the restaurant industry, I started to realize that what I ate affected my own health and well-being. And little did I know at the time I was celiac and have other autoimmune issues myself. And so, and I was burning the candle at both ends and doing that restaurant industry cooking and, the lifestyle that you do in your early 20s. As I started to change what I did for myself and started seeing some healing through food, I realized, innately I'm a teacher. This is something that I could teach others. And so I went back to school to become a holistic nutrition consultant is what we have to call it here in Alberta, but essentially a holistic nutritionist. And that designation was important to me because we're all biochemically individual, but yet there's so many components in sort of the holism of health that are really key to understanding food and nourishment itself. So did that. And then, had babies and saw the influence of food on their own health and their lifestyle. And now those babies are growing up, and it's like I had this incredible experiment for 20 years and fed these brilliant children that I have, and they've turned out great. They have wonderful immunity and energy and vitality, and they're smart as whips. And so it's just been proven time and time again to me that food really, really influences what we do. So much so that when my son came out as transgender in 2015, and we saw him suffering with a lot of anxiety and depression, and noticed that reflected back within the LGBT community, I realized I needed more education to be able to help and understand the needs of that community. So I went back to school, got a master's degree. And my graduate work is in the role that food literacy education, so both the cooking aspect and the nutrition aspect, have on health and well-being of marginalized people. And throughout the discovery process of doing my thesis, I learned that leadership was actually a really huge component to understanding how to integrate food literacy into marginalized communities. So that led me to really working with leaders and understanding that, oh, look at that. It isn't just marginalized people who don't maybe necessarily have a great sense of self-worth, don't have access to food, are denied food for a variety of reasons. But even people that are the most privileged can be suffering in a really huge way from things like burnout, exhaustion, fatigue, and the myriad diseases and lifestyle inhibitions that come with not taking care of yourself, not putting yourself first for a variety of reasons. So it's been a twisty, turny path. But at the end of the day, I think what I've realized is we're all the same, and we all deserve to move, and we deserve to eat and to be nourished in sort of an extraordinary way. And it's sort of my job and my goal to remove barriers for all kinds of people to food and food education.
Wow, that's amazing. I've known you for a long time, maybe 15, 20 years now. But
we started our practices together.
When we started together, yes.
Yeah.
But I haven't really heard you kind of lay out your path like that. And also, more recently with your master's degree in, what was the title of the master's degree? Sorry, leadership in marginalized.
So it's actually a Master's of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies. And I chose that degree because being able to bring in disciplines, a variety of different disciplines, to reach my goal, which was to understand food literacy. There's no degree that teaches you about food literacy, right?
I was wondering.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty special degree. So it was, how can I pull in different types of research from different industries and different faculties to actually support this learning to make the biggest impact.
Right. And then you saw this connection with marginalized communities, especially with your son, but leaders at the same time.
Yeah, it was sort of this, it was funny, like taking all these amazing courses about leadership and working every day with leaders as my peers in school. These are people who are, they had MBAs, they're, C-level execs going back to school to take their masters, their second and third masters. And I'm observing them as we're learning together, and I'm watching them get more and more burned out. Yeah. Watching them suffer, watching their aches and pains, and talking to me about their anxiety, their mental health, their overwhelm that they feel. And I was like, this is no different than, the youth that have been kicked out of their homes simply for being born the way that they were born. It's the same. There's obviously a privilege gap there, don't get me wrong, but people are people. Yeah. And at the end of the day, especially during COVID, we're all suffering in similar ways. And we're also experiencing great things in similar ways. It's not all negative, but yeah, people are people at the end of the day.
Fascinating. And so with these like C-suite executives, I guess we all have this stereotype in our minds of the CEO who does 4 hours sleep a night, runs a multi-million or billion-dollar company, doesn't have time for lunch, lunch is for wimps. What happens to these people? Can you take us through that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because there's definitely an observational pattern that I've noticed. It never surprises me when I'm coaching, doing nutrition coaching for a C-suite exec. They all do HIIT training.
Because it's fast and like powerful, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They all want a plan, right? They want numbers, they want a graph, they want charts, because this idea of perfectionism is very prevalent amongst people who are extremely high achievers. And perfectionism, to a point, absolutely gets us quite far. Yeah. But there's also there's downsides to perfectionism, including, these are usually the same people that have chronic pain, inflammation, reactions to foods that they can't experience, histamine intolerance. So, hives, rashes that seem, strange after they get out of the shower, or things like that. Digestive difficulties, hormonal imbalances would be one of the biggest things that we see. And this is all because the more pressure, the more stress, the more responsibility we put on ourselves to be the best leaders that we can, the more we have these physiological reactions in the body. So we see our cortisol, which is our stress response modulator, right, go into overdrive. We see our adrenaline increase because we're actually running out of really innate energy. So we use things like coffee, HIIT training, running, things that produce adrenaline, to cope and to get through our day. And we think that's creating energy, but it's actually destroying energy. And then over the course of time, it's kind of, this is a terrible analogy, but it is kind of like, kicking a faithful dog. Your body will help you as much as it can for as long as it can until it gets too tired, and then it's going to lay down. Right. Yeah. And so when I get to talk to executives, it's kind of at this point where they're really tired people. Right. They're really tired. And then it's working? Much harder.
They're still working? Usually, yeah.
Like, let's hope, unless they've gotten to the point with adrenal fatigue and exhaustion where they're on the couch and they literally can't do anything else, right? Mm-hmm. And this is where we see extra medications come into play, things like, blood pressure medication, proton pump inhibitors, obviously mental health related medication. And there's nothing wrong with medication. Sometimes we need it, but we just see this overlay of Band-Aids when the root cause isn't being taken care of.
Yeah, interesting. I'm doing some extra training at the moment with a company called Hinsa, and the CEO of Hinsa, she tells this funny story that she wasn't always in the company, even though it's actually, her name is I think it's Annika Hinsa. So it's her family name, but she worked elsewhere in business. And the realization to leave that and come to her family company was when she fell down the stairs late for a meeting, smashed her head open, was bleeding. And the first thing she did was crawl to her laptop and open it up and make sure everything was okay. Right. And then she was like, all right, this isn't right anymore. This, the priorities are all wrong, right?
Yeah.
I kind of, I work with this model where I call it mission, and I put nutrition under mission. And the reason I do that is if your mission is a long life, to be a good parent, to contribute to the community, you need to take care of yourself. And the decisions that perhaps you make in our 20s, like you said when you were younger, where you kind of abuse your body or take it for granted, you stop doing that. And you end up thinking, well, hang on, this isn't going to be good for me in the long term. And the example I like to give is of an athlete, where the athlete wants to perhaps go to the Olympics. And so the athlete's friends say, hey, there's a party this weekend, a block party. Are you going to come? And the athlete says, no, because I've got training tomorrow morning. And if I miss that training session, it will affect the rest of my week, and I will have less chance of going to the Olympics. So everything, what they eat and what they do and how they sleep is sort of formed underneath this kind of mission. And I think our CEOs and our corporate executives and so on, they probably have quite a clear mission within the business world, but perhaps they haven't got that kind of sense of values and health and mission for themselves outside that business world. Does that something that resonates with you and what you see?
Mm-hmm. I like to think about our allostatic load or our stress load, right, as a bathtub. Right. This is how I explain it to my clients. So you've got a tap and it drips in your life stress all the time. And you can either do two things. You can either let it overflow. And this is where we see adrenal fatigue, burnout, and exhaustion, or you can start to drain it. Right. And when we drain it through things like movement, good nutrition, mental health support, meditation, these things that are actually getting rid of the stress, then we have room for more of the drips. And now we have actually a whole other tap, and that's COVID. Right. And COVID is dripping in its own stress on top of everything else, literally in the way that we function when we go to the grocery store and, being suspicious about people being sick and all these very strange things that the average human has never had to, to deal with before. And keep in mind, I do nutrition consults with people all over the world. So whether I'm talking to somebody in Turkey or I'm talking to somebody in Thailand or here in Canada, that COVID tap is dripping. And so then you take the CEO or somebody that leads a team, and that's not a drip on the original tap. They've turned that up sometimes, to 11 kind of thing. And it's flowing into the bathtub. And the way that most people, because we're human beings, we want quick fixes. The way that most people think they're draining their bathtub is by using coping tools. And sometimes those coping tools can be positive, but they're often things like alcohol, things like, medications that slow our nervous system down, things like smoking, habitual things. And we've also found that, people who lead teams are often solitary people who don't have a lot of time for socialization, right? So that's another way to drain the bathtub. And lately with COVID, we can't even hug people. My son just got home from university. He said, "Mom, this is the first hug I've had in 3 months."
Oh, geez.
Well, no, it's heartbreaking, And so when you're a CEO and now you're working from home and you're leading teams and you're talking to people and you're making big decisions, who's hugging you at the end of the day? So to me, that's a form of nourishment as well that we might be missing. And we haven't even started talking about food yet.
Well, no, exactly. It's such a big subject, isn't it? But you're right. Let's come back to the food. So you have one of these clients comes to you. They've got symptoms of fatigue. Perhaps they know it. Perhaps they've been may have had a consult with a doctor or something like that, and they've got a couple of markers which are off, and they decide to work with you. What's the first thing you do with them?
So the first thing that I do is I like to get the lay of the land going through each of their body systems. So we don't jump into what they eat in a day right away. It's important to understand who they are as people. So what's their digestion like? We basically have two brains. We have one in our gut and one up here. And our gut brain can tell us a lot about how we're managing and handling stress. So what's the digestion like? What are their energy levels like? Where are they at with hormones? So if cortisol can't regulate stress very well, how does that affect insulin? How does that affect cholesterol? How does that affect testosterone and sex drive? How does that affect, women moving into menopause who are often at a leadership point, right? All the hormones work in concert. So it's really important to sort of get a picture. What kind of movement are they doing? How are they sleeping? These are all incredibly important concepts before I even say to them, what do you eat in a day? Because, resiliency, it can be really key. And somebody in their 20s, we all used to say we could eat a whole pizza when we were, at midnight.
Yeah, and then fall asleep without any heartburn. That doesn't happen anymore.
Exactly. Now you have one piece of pizza and you think you have a knife in your back and it's heartburn. Yeah. So, where are they at with their immunity? Where are they at with their stress levels? This is the holistic part of nutrition. Once we've done that, then I start to look at what they eat in a day and really helping them understand that, first of all, listen, no judgment here. We're all eating what we're eating, right? And we're doing the best that we can for the bodies that we have, for the budgets that we have, for the brains that we have, and for the access to food that we have. So starting to look at patterns of eating and why we're eating. Are we eating for nourishment? Are we eating for coping? Are we eating to try to get energy, but it's not working? Are we eating for soothing? And then really for me, it's never about, sorry, type A personalities, and I am one of them, but it's never about diet, a diet for me. It's about inclusion, not exclusion. So once we've helped people understand about, gaining some awareness around their body systems, then we start to introduce foods so that we can celebrate food. So that they don't feel like they're being super restricted, because it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. We have years of data on diets. They work short term, but they certainly don't work as lifestyle modification long term. So introducing things into the diet and maybe changing some habits. So if people have access to cooking, can we get them cooking? That's huge, because your knife is your key to your metabolism. Your knife is your key to wellness, right? But not everybody can cook. I have a lot of clients in Hong Kong. They don't even really have kitchens. You know what I mean? It's just a different lifestyle there. So if we can't get cooking, where are we getting our foods from? And then awareness around what's actually in that food. Where are the hidden sugars? Where are the things that are taking your energy, right? What's making that food really hard to digest? Things like gluten, things like cow dairy. What are some things you might be intolerant to that you didn't even know you were intolerant to? And why are you intolerant to them? So it's a long process, but the idea is to get people eating intuitively, to be reaching for food that they know feels good in their body and actually creates energy and creates longevity and that real sharpness of mind that you need to lead a team.
I want to go for a few different tangents here, but let's go back to that knife is the key to your health, because I think that's kind of a cool phrase, but I don't quite understand it. What do you mean? Like
knife skills are life skills.
Yeah, knife skills are life skills. Like the way you chop your food, what you're chopping. Like, what do you mean by that?
If you're chopping your food, right?
Okay.
So most people are so used to the idea that food can be passed through their car window now,
Right.
that they just haven't learned to cook. And if you're from our generation, you and I, we grew up with working parents who kind of lost the traditional skill of making
Yeah.
food from scratch, like our
Started to lose it
grandparents
for
had.
sure.
Yeah. And that's where we saw the rise of things like TV dinners, more additives, preservatives, and hidden sugars. So if you can get into the kitchen and just chop an apple, which is a whole food, it doesn't have a label. You don't have to worry about how many grams of sugar. Just eat the apple. You're doing better than 95% of the population that didn't chop an apple. You know what I mean? So it's holding a knife is incredibly empowering. It sounds a bit psychotic, but I like to give knives to children very early on because I like them to feel empowered to be able to make choices in the kitchen using, by the way, budget-friendly food too, right?
Yeah.
I talked to a client today that eats out for every meal, and they're not a very old person. So imagine spending $25, $30, $40 a day on eating out and not knowing exactly where your ingredients are and having no control over the amount of sugar, the amount of rancid fat, the amount of preservatives that are in a meal that's been prepared for you, versus making a salad dressing that takes 5 minutes with, extra virgin olive oil and apple cider vinegar and turmeric and garlic and these things that are powerful medicinal foods. So holding a knife is empowering.
Okay. And some of the clients that we've seen in conjunction, that you've seen for nutrition, I've seen for movement and fitness consultations, they tell me that you spend a lot of time on organization, how you organize your meals for the week. And they seem to think, well, they tell me that's a real benefit from consultations with you. So tell me, why do you do that?
Yeah, I think there's a level of overwhelm that people have in relation to food. I've heard people say things like, I hate food, which breaks my heart, and it's because they don't hate the actual food. They like yummy food. They hate the experience of trying to do something that they're not skilled at, right? So having a level of organization and simplifying in the kitchen, basically putting on your chef hat, and thinking like a chef thinks in your own home, makes your life a lot easier in the kitchen. Because when you're a chef and you're working in a restaurant, your workspace is simple and it's organized because you have to prepare a lot of things very quickly, right? And you're probably standing for between 8 and 16 hours a day, pretty much in the same space. And so you want your kitchen to be organized in a way that you're not expending extra physical energy and tiring yourself out in the kitchen. Sometimes people have, body issues like multiple sclerosis or other inflammatory concerns, and just holding a knife improperly exhausts them because it hurts their wrist, it hurts their shoulder. So we work together to organize their drawers, organize their counters, make sure they know what they're prepping, how much time, how much energy they have to prep. And that is so much easier than trying to think of, 6 recipes throughout the week and having a crazy amount of ingredients, and your kitchen is a disaster. So teaching simple routines is efficient, and it's so much better for you physically and mentally. And it helps you, once again, bring joy back into food,
So did you learn that when you did your holistic nutrition course, or is that like practically learned on the job? Before you answer that, well, the reason I sort of asked that question is because most nutritionists are about the food, like this is the portions on the plate. They don't care where you get it from. They don't care how you prepare it.
Yeah. And, that I think was learned practically on the job, culinary school, and having that kind of brain that can be organized like that. And then once, when you and I opened up our practices here in Calgary, and we renovated a teaching kitchen, remember?
Yeah.
And that teaching kitchen was there because I started practicing as a holistic nutritional consultant. And within days, it occurred to me, I can't tell people to eat this nourishing food if they don't even know how to hold a knife and prepare it and make it taste good. So we renovated a kitchen, and we got people in there doing these practical skills so that they could make this very nutrient dense and also very potent tasting food, right? Into something that tasted good for them, which would encourage them to eat it. And often when you're switching from a standard American diet, which is beige and bland and filled with sugar and and wheat and, process things, your taste buds need time to catch up with you. And being able to continue to make food yummy is incredibly important. Teaching at the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, one thing that I often see is, like, bless their hearts, like the nutrition students coming in with like a mason jar filled with like brown goo. And it's probably 100 different superfoods. Oh, it's kale and it's almond butter and it's all these things all put in to make a very medicinal drink, but doesn't taste good and it doesn't look good, right? So being able to actually continue to sort of put the culinary aspect into it allows people to really, derive pleasure from eating, which is really important as well.
Interesting. Well remembered about that initial clinic we had. I think that must have been one of the first. There was an osteopathic clinic and teaching kitchen. Not many clinics have that. I don't think I've seen that anywhere really.
Nope.
Maybe we should have expanded more on that. Oh well.
Yeah, we were onto something for sure.
we were. Okay, so you got these guys and girls coming to you in different states. You've looked at their systems in their body systems, the hormones. You've tied it all together. You've helped them. You've educated them around organization and real skills. And what do you do for the food? Let's say someone has adrenal fatigue. They've got brain fog. They're not working to their as efficiently as they can. What do you do?
First of all, let me say that this journey is never just about me, one practitioner. I always engage other practitioners into my client's health journey. So it's really nice to have some definitive test results from clients that their functional medicine doctor provided for them. To kind of know, like, are they really vitamin D deficient? Are they anemic? We don't need to guess at this stuff anymore. Yes, we can see body symptoms, but why not have the test results right in front of you, right? Why not know where their cortisol and their progesterone and estrogen are at? So I really like that aspect of it. I like starting with some results and some data. Right. But if we don't have that, that's fine. We can certainly look at the symptomatology of a client and then look at the foods that are, from an orthomolecular standpoint, so the function of food, and actually look at the foods that are the most beneficial in a general sense. So for instance, we know that foods that are high in B vitamins support adrenal fatigue because B vitamins help you create energy in the mitochondria of the cell, right? We know that generally. But then we have to make sure that that person is digesting, assimilating, eliminating the food that we're asking them to take in. So it's never just about the function of the food. This is where that biochemical individuality really comes into play. And we may actually back away from doing any kind of adrenal support until we know that their digestion is functioning optimally. So we might work at that first, right? So that they then can absorb the nutrients that we're asking them to take in through kale, through, whatever, brown rice, through whatever seems to be working for them. Because if that digestion component isn't there, then the rest of it isn't going to matter. So, and the compliance will be so much lower too, because they're going to be in pain and still tired. And they're going to say, this food doesn't work for me. This isn't working. So, and then at that point, if through dietary changes and sort of looking at foods that are inflammatory and, things like sugar, things like dairy, things like some inflammatory fats, changing things up and increasing good foods, we're still not seeing the results that we want, then we would continue to engage other practitioners as well, people who specialize in digestive support. We would get them cooking, making sure that they're using recipes that are adapted to their needs, to exactly what they need for themselves, making sure that their family is engaged, especially when you're looking at somebody with adrenal fatigue, because when you're tired, when you're really, really, really tired, the last thing you want to do is cook and learn things, right? So it's really important to have that sort of holistic team, which includes family or whoever lives in the person's house, to help them stay on track so that they can rebuild and revitalize their system.
Okay, fascinating. So you don't prescribe one sort of diet, like a paleo diet or a vegan diet. You make it totally individual to the person, and looking at food as a kind of a tool to change whatever it is, like the digestive assimilation in that client or the energy levels. So is that right? The food's more of food is a kind of a medicinal way.
Yeah, it really is. And I've seen really healthy people who are keto and really unhealthy people. I've seen really healthy vegans and really unhealthy vegans. Subscribing and being really stoic about your plan that you're on can sometimes be a detriment to you. And at different points in your life, you need different things, right? We need different inputs to help us create that energy, because our hormones are always changing and working in concert with each other. And we're turning over our cells constantly, and we're always different people. Every 7 years, we're an entirely different person, essentially. So, our stress inputs change massively. When I think about my last 5 years here, I feel like for sure I'm an entirely different person, and I eat differently now than I did then, and as we age and our body systems change, we require different nutrients as well. So yeah, I am not about one specific type. I don't think anything works well for every person. And now that I've been in practice for, I guess this is 16 years or something like that, and have raised children, I can really say I know for a fact that biochemical individuality and really supporting the person and who they are is what matters. And that's how we see relief and change and success.
Exactly. And you really hit on it well there with compliance. You can make someone, you probably wouldn't, but some people can give someone like a really healthy nutrition plan for a week, and the person won't follow it at all, because day one is too complicated or whatever it is. So compliance is key.
Compliance is key. And also understanding, sort of, if we can shift kind of into looking at sort of like a life coaching style of practice, understanding that mastery of anything takes a long time. We don't master anything right away. And there's always hurdles. And one of those hurdles is usually our ego, right?
Right.
So for people who are concerned with weight balance, and I don't talk about weight loss, but weight balance, which is a happy side effect of a well-functioning system, those people are usually the ones that have the most knowledge about food. And they usually eat a lot less, even if they're clinically obese. They're often eating less than somebody that isn't. And it's because they have this great amount of knowledge, but it's that knowledge that bottlenecks their success. And so looking at what barriers are to learning, what barriers are to action is just as important as the food itself.
Do you sit there like Bruce Lee with the 2 glasses of water? Have you heard this one? Where he's like, what one's full, right? Because this is you, this is your knowledge. And he throws it out. He said, you have to be empty to absorb my knowledge.
Exactly.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm sure you wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to do it from now on.
You should do it, especially when they're very knowledgeable. Yeah, I mean, I have the same thing with injury rehab and fitness training. The more knowledgeable the client, sometimes the more rigid they can be and the less successful they can be. Give me someone who hasn't done any training before and is willing to try anything, get great results. And give me someone who's very experienced and looking for a specific result. It's sometimes harder to get them to that result. Interesting. Okay, so I want to start wrapping this up a little bit, but for our listeners, what I'd like to, if possible, could you share some practical tips for perhaps starting to overcome adrenal fatigue or tiredness, specifically in the workplace?
The first thing is put yourself first. That's a huge tip, but it's incredibly important because as leaders or team members, we want to do well by the people that we work with, and or work for, or and we often put ourselves last. As parents, we do that as well. And so, there's a great book by a great leadership expert, Simon Sinek, and it's called Leaders Eat Last. And I always say, no, leaders, sorry, buddy, leaders have to eat first, actually. And I know he doesn't mean it the same way that I do, but it's really important that we take time to be able to understand how to put ourselves first. That's tip number one. So that means, it means something different for everybody, but it certainly means nourishment has to be key. The second tip is to be mindful when eating. So another thing we do is we quickly shove a bunch of food in our mouth, and we're probably still in fight or flight mode and have adrenaline moving through our body, as opposed to rest and digest mode. When we stay in fight or flight mode, our body thinks we're being chased by a tiger all the time, right? You've heard that analogy.
Yeah.
And the blood isn't, or the energy isn't in the digestive system. It's in your arms and legs so that you can run away or fight. And when we shift into rest and digest mode, that's where we see better absorption of nutrients. So there was a wonderful study down at UC Davis where they took, in their obesity clinic, they took a bunch of people and they said, you have to actually take a full hour to eat your food. So same amount of food that you would always get, but you actually need to stretch it out, and you can't talk. You have to be really quiet and mindful. Taste your food. That whole idea of mindfulness when you're eating, that raisin exercise that John Kabat-Zinn talks about. Taste that raisin, be grateful for it. Send these signals to your body that all is well, and you shift into rest and digest mode. And then no matter what it is that you're eating, you're going to digest it better. And I have had clients, very high level clients, say that is the number one thing that has changed the amount of weight that they have been able to drop. The amount of energy and vigor that they feel in a day is becoming mindful about the food. The rest of it, honestly.
Hang on. What happened in the study?
Oh, well, people lost weight.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm familiar with that.
They saw success. Nothing changed.
I'm familiar with that study. It was like 10% more. They lost 10% more weight without any change in the amount of calories.
In calories. Exactly. Yeah. There is actually, if you go to the UC Davis website, they link to I think it's the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and there's a mindfulness infographic that I've got on my website, which is really great, that just helps people understand about taking that time. And then the third thing, these are really esoteric concepts, right? I'm not saying, well, I just want you to, eat more omega-3 fats. Yeah, listen, we can find that information's out there. I'm trying to give information that is new and different. The other thing is my big question. I have a blog about this right now because it's the holidays. And the question to ask yourself is, how does this serve me? So when you're enjoying treats, when you're enjoying something that may not serve you physically, it might create inflammation in the body. It's got sugar in it, whatever. It's got excess fat or alcohol. How does this serve me? So could you eat that beautiful brownie that your grandmother made at Christmas? Could you eat that and really enjoy it? Yeah, you can if you're eating it mindfully. Probably by the second or third brownie, if you're asking that question, how does this serve me? The answer is, it doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to make me feel achy. It's going to, give me gas and bloating, that kind of thing. That will be the answer.
Yeah.
So slowing down enough to be able to eat with purpose and thought and mindfulness, and asking yourself what I call the divine question, how does this serve me? Seems over the last 15 years of practice has been one of the things that people have said has been the most impactful. And then lastly, doing your food prep at home. Preparing food in your fridge. It's a simple, practical tool. Boiling a dozen eggs at the start of the week, chopping a bunch of veggies, making a really nutrient-dense salad dressing instead of the ones, at the counter that are filled with hydrogenated oils and palm sugar and things like that. Those dressings take 5 minutes to make. That goes a really long way to helping sustain our energy and save our energy, this precious energy that we're trying to get back when we have adrenal fatigue and exhaustion, right? So those would be my tips.
Love it. Asking a nutritionist what tips there are, and she doesn't mention anything really to do with the food we eat. But that puts it into context, doesn't it? It's like, we shouldn't be eating necessarily the foods that we all know are bad for us, but at the same time, if we eat whole foods and foods that are minimally processed, then it's how we eat them that becomes more important.
Yeah, because if you look at different cultures around the world, the people that live up north from here in Canada are going to be eating a much different diet that live, down where you are, right? Yeah. So to tell everybody to eat fish oil, first of all, expresses privilege in a massive way. Not everybody can access a fish oil supplement or fish, right? Sure. So can we take what we do have access to and make it the most nutrient dense by giving our body the right condition to be able to absorb the nutrients?
I love it. And this really fits well with this model of lifestyle medicine. There's not really a hierarchy. It's an interrelated circle. But someone mentioned to me the other day, they said, you can't exercise your way out of a poor diet. And I thought that was quite key. And I was like, okay, so maybe nutrition is number one. Then they said, well, you can't eat yourself out of no sleep. And I was like, okay, so maybe sleep's number one. But then it's like, well, maybe, but there's sleep, and then there's community and stress management and toxic, avoiding toxins. And we put that all together, and your 4 tips kind of bring in most of those aspects into them. Sure, there's not the exercise in there, but definitely avoiding the toxic substances and taking time for yourself. And if we are mindful eating, if there's colleagues who are involved in that, that will be a community thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we go back to the bathtub analogy, these are the pillars or the feet that hold up the bathtub.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how big your bathtub is, maybe, or how big the drain is, or whatever. However we look at that, right? Because the stress comes in, we need a big drain to get rid of it, right? Yeah. And lots of different actions to get rid of it. And if you have a really solid foundation through movement and sleep and nutrition and detoxification, then it's going to be able to drain easier. It just is. And the bathtub's not going to fall through the floor, hopefully. Hopefully, yeah, we don't want that to happen. All right, well, thank you very much, Barb. Now, if my listeners are interested in learning more about you, how would they do that?
So barbsheldon.com is my website. They can find me on social media, Barb Sheldon Culinary Nutrition. And I do have packages available for leadership and teams to help do exactly what we talked about today. So they're welcome to book a consultation through there. Get some one-on-one coaching, or even group activities too, which can be done all online. So
you work with individuals and teams in the workplace?
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'll link all those details below, however people are watching this or listening to this, so they'll be able to find you very easily. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure, Ed. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been fun. I've learned a lot. Wow, what a fascinating individual Barb is. I hope you've learned a lot and can take some of those tips and put them into your everyday life. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you like what you see here and you're watching this on YouTube, can you subscribe to my channel? Or if you're listening to this on a podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, can you like and subscribe? The more likes and subscribe I get, the more I know that you're listening, and then the more podcasts I can make. So please do that for me, and I will see you, or you can listen to me in the next one.